Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. And remember, I'm also hosting a couple of other shows at the moment. One is with Netgear called Switched On Thinking. And I'm also hosting another podcast called Tech Fusion by Citrix. All of which can be found on your favourite podcast player. But before I flirt too dangerously with overexposure, nobody wants to go there, I want to get back to focusing on solving real-world problems for businesses by leveraging technology. But is that possible to do that without overcomplicating anything? Well, Yuval Rooz, the co-founder and CEO of a company called Digital Asset, is going to join me on the podcast today. And he's working with developers to incorporate blockchain approaches that simplify how distributed applications and processes are both built and interconnected between organizations. And what's the end goal? To easily drive business transactions. It's a great conversation, so please buckle up and hold on tight so I can beam your ears all the way to Battery Park in New York so we can speak with Yuval now. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, Neil, thank you for having me here today. My name is Yuval Rooz, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Digital Asset. My background is actually technology. I studied electrical engineering and then moved into financial services, where I worked as a software developer in a hedge fund and trading company. And in 2014, I left the financial industry to start a fintech called Digital Asset.
Excellent. And just to set the scene, especially for people that are hearing about Digital Asset for the very first time, can you tell me a little bit more about what Digital Asset is and also your developer-friendly open source application called DAML? Is that right? DAML?
Yeah, absolutely. And so when I left in 2014, I've been working for a trading company. I've been running their venture capital investments for quite some time. And we started looking into the space of blockchain cryptocurrency. And one thing that made me realize is that the entire world is digital assets. Even when you think about your internal contracts within a company, it's a digital asset. Your workflows, if they are not manual, are like digital assets that have very clear behavior. So we came into the blockchain space, and very early on, we realized that to digitize the world, to digitize assets, to digitize processes, it becomes very complicated because the world is becoming more and more complex, more and more connected, and allowing developers to have fine-grained control of everything or understanding how the entire technology stack works is going to make the development of these applications extremely hard. So one of the things that we've done very early on is develop the language that you refer to, DAML, which is really a language that allows a developer very easily to digitize any asset or any type of workflow with very little code that is actually very business friendly. And what I mean by business friendly is not that your typical business analyst or product person can now take the language and build a full application using the language. But if a developer were to walk a business analyst or a product person through the code, they would actually understand. They would be able to comprehend and rationalize what the code is doing. And even more than that, be able to test the application, so write test cases for the application. And the result of that, what we've seen is that we were able to build these applications significantly faster than using traditional technology. And like you mentioned, the language is open source, but another important feature of the language that differentiates it from anything else out there is that the language is what I would call platform or infrastructure agnostic, meaning it wasn't designed for only one specific database or blockchain to run on, but it is agnostic. So it abstracts away the complexity of all those technologies. And you as a developer need only to focus on what is the business that you're trying to digitize.
And I love what you're saying here, because I think digital transformation is a huge buzzword at the moment. But although we're trying to, or businesses are trying to simplify everything, the world is getting much, much more complex. And that's one of the reasons I invited you on the podcast today, because when I was doing a little bit of research, I was reading how you're working with developers to incorporate blockchain approaches that actually simplify how distributed applications and those processes are built and interconnected between organizations to ultimately easily drive business transactions, which must be music to the ears of so many businesses out there. But can you expand on that for me?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that when blockchain was introduced to the world, and this is when we started working on it, a lot of the ideas of blockchain was, how do you reduce data reconciliation? How do you make sure that data sources are always synchronized within an organization and even across organizations, which I think is one of the key points when it comes to blockchain, is where there's not so much trust. And what we started realizing is that even when you have a centralized application that runs inside an organization, we would call it a distributed application, meaning there are multiple parties that are involved in that application. And therefore, we think about the entire world being a combination of many, many what we would call multi-party applications. Now, in traditional technology, I'm not saying that it's easy to develop multi-party applications, but as you start getting into a world where you want to have organizations connected to one another, and now suddenly you need to have transactions across what we would call trust domains, meaning you need to have a multi-party application that connects your organization to someone else's organization. Now suddenly the world becomes more and more complex. How do you define privacy? How do you define trust models? And all of those variables make it extremely hard to develop these applications correctly, meaning that it's not only functionally the application does what it's supposed to do, but also the non-functional side of it, that it actually maintains the privacy features of the application and the privacy features, the security features of the application. So what we've done is we said, okay, can you actually define the process from a business perspective? Don't worry actually how it gets implemented. Don't worry about how the privacy or the security gets maintained. Just explain to us what is the business trying to do. And we believe that we can later on execute that application for you on different technologies correctly. And this is really what we set ourselves to do, and have proven it successful with multiple technologies. I will take an analogy from a different place in technology that I think a lot of people or people that are close to technology would be familiar with, which is the example of what Java did with C++. So the world of programming became more and more popular, and C++ or C required the developer to really control almost every aspect of how you control the machine. And one big component of the developer was to manage the memory of the machine. And there's a lot of times people hear in C++ applications this thing called memory leakage, where the developer, because there's so much complexity within the application, mismanage the memory, and then you run out of memory and the application crashes. And then came Java and said, you know what, in most applications, you don't need that. You can actually just describe what the application is doing, and we will manage that memory for you. And Java became super popular, right? And took over the mainstream of application development. We think very similarly about what we would call multi-party applications, which we think every application in the world is effectively a multi-party application. Is this complexity that is under the hood shouldn't be managed by the average developer, because there's just no need for that. And what we've done with our language is we abstracted that complexity and really letting the business focus just on the business logic.
And on the flip side, of course, of creating a solution that simplifies these processes is that it creates a demand for a new set of skills. And for example, the demand of developers with blockchain skills is continuing to rise. And LinkedIn listed it as a top 10 in-demand skill for this year and beyond. So I've got to ask, how are you helping meet this demand?
Yeah, maybe we're a bit contrarian to that demand, which is it's exactly the point that I was raising is why does a developer need to know how a blockchain works, where a blockchain to us is really just another database that have very complex behavior under the hood, where really what a business is trying to do, a business is not trying to bring blockchain to their customers. A business is trying to bring a new set of functionality, a new set of behavior. So if a business can actually drive that functionality and that behavior without having to know all the complexity under the hood, I think that businesses would be more interested. I mean, take an example with some of the advancement in AI, right? I mean, at the end of the day, AI is a very complex piece of mathematics, and even more complex to implement it in a performant way. You don't, as a business that wants to take advantage of AI, you don't hire AI experts necessarily to go and re-implement AI from the ground up. No, there's a bunch of libraries and a bunch of abstractions that have been created that as long as you know what an AI algorithm takes or needs or requires, you can get a lot of that for free. So we think about these things very similarly, is that most organizations will not be able to or do not want to hire a whole set of what we would call blockchain experts, but have already the business domain experts that we believe will be able to use our language to take advantage of the properties of blockchain without never needing to know the inner works of how blockchain works.
And just to bring everything to life that we're talking about here, do you have any examples of companies that are using DAML to build new trading platforms built on blockchain or for software development to launch and deploy new products and services? Because that's the sweet spot, isn't it?
Yeah, so we have a bunch of examples. We can start in the US. We've been working with a big company in financial services called Broadridge that are looking to digitize the process of bilateral and repo, US Treasury repo, which is a few $1 trillion market. And they believe that by digitizing the process, you will bring much more fine-grained control into this asset class, and that will allow financial services to run this product more efficiently. Again, they're not reinventing how the product from a financial perspective behaves, but they're just digitizing the process, no different than what we talked about earlier, that this world is talking about how do we digitize the world more and more. And they've done it actually with a lot of ease. They are actually experts both in blockchains and in their business, but they didn't need to know how a blockchain works in order to digitize that asset class. On the other side of the world, we have the Australian Securities Exchange that are digitizing the entire Australian capital market. So securities, cash securities in Australia, every publicly traded company in Australia is going to be tracked and managed using blockchain technology in the next year or so. So again, we are seeing across the world clients using the technology. And it's not only relevant to financial services. We have clients that are now thinking about their internal workflows. So if one thing that COVID exposed is that if your business heavily rely on manual processing, something like COVID exposes you to a risk that you haven't had before, which is you don't have all of your manpower or all of your workforce all centrally located in the same office. They're all now working from home. So guess what? If your business is heavily paper processing, then you are exposed. So we are having clients that are digitizing their internal workflows using our technology. And then you can expand that to pretty much every industry in the world.
Fantastic. And I think I should also highlight as well, it's incredibly exciting times at Digital Asset at the moment, because I believe that VMware joined Salesforce and Samsung as investors. So can you tell me a little bit more about that funding and what it means to you as a company?
Yeah, I think that if you go back to my comment that it was technology agnostic or infrastructure agnostic, in blockchain today, there's an aspect that, in my opinion, have prevented the adoption of the technology as fast as, in my opinion, it should have, because of the benefits for the business, which is every flavor of technology requires you to have different skills within your company or different knowledge. What do I mean by that? If you take blockchain X, that blockchain X has its own development environment. And the way that blockchain X works and achieves privacy and security is very unique to that implementation. So let's say you have a developer that wants to build an application on top of it. You need them to be highly familiar with that specific offering. And then you have blockchain Y, and blockchain Y has its own set of features and development tools. So now let's say that you're a business and you say, who's going to be the winner, X or Y? And you almost have to say, well, I don't want to take that risk because, I'm doing, insurance claims. I don't really care which blockchain is going to win. I just want to bring a product to my customer that takes advantage of the features of blockchain. So now you need to have your development environment to have the skills, knowledge of how X and Y works. And unfortunately, there's not only X and Y, there's many blockchains out there. And to us, businesses do not like to bet their business on technology, especially if they're not necessarily a technology company, they're more of a product company. So I think that prevented adoption. And I'm going to get to VMware and your question in a second. So one of the things that we thought is, can you take our language that really abstracts that complexity, that infrastructure away, and say, well, it works with all blockchains. So now you as a business can say, okay, how do I digitize my business? How do I create this blockchain or distributed application for my customers? And you can write it in DAML. And once you write it in DAML, it can run on all of these blockchains or even traditional technologies. And the great thing about it is you are future-proofing your solution. So in the previous example, if you chose X and you developed it using X tools, and in a year from now, you realize Y was really the technology that everybody's going to use, you have to scrape everything that you've done and redo it all over again. And that's not a good thing for business. So with DAML, you can start with X today. And if you wanted to migrate from X to Y, you don't have to actually scrape the application that you've built, because DAML will run on Y as well. So now I'm getting to your question. Why is VMware investing is a big deal? So VMware have their own blockchain, and there's quite interesting approach that they took. VMware is a vendor to pretty much every enterprise in the world. They understand what it means to run this mission critical infrastructure within clients. And they went and they looked at DAML and they said, this is a really good way to develop applications on top of our blockchain. So having them and companies like Samsung and Salesforce, that are companies that are known to build enterprise software or to run enterprise infrastructure, for them to stand behind a product that we have developed and actually invest in the company is a huge testament to the strategy that we're pushing forward, which is to create this uniform development environment that is technology or infrastructure agnostic. Very long answer to your short question.
No problem at all. I love that. And I'm curious, there will be a lot of startup founders listening, a little bit envious of those big name investors you've got. So for any startup founder listening that could be at a various stage of their journey, what has been your secret to attracting big name investors, would you say?
I think that if you're looking at what is happening in software, generally speaking, so the world of technology, the way that I see it is the role of technology is to make life simpler and to be able to do more complicated things faster than before. So you can see it pretty much in every aspect of technology. 20 years ago, to build a static HTTP site was not the easiest thing in the world. Today, you go to, I don't know, Wix, and you could be almost a toddler and create an HTTP site without having to know anything about coding. So this trend of abstracting and simplifying the world is definitely something that happens with technology over and over again. Now, why is that important to your question? Is that in the world of cloud or in the world of infrastructure for enterprises, the big tech providers have done a really good job abstracting the hardware requirements, all of the DevOps requirements, and are making it much easier for businesses to build solutions on top of these things, or on top of what we call today cloud. But what you're going to see is that cloud, and I think already today, is becoming commodity, right? It's commoditized. I mean, if you go and you want to build and you want to go between, Azure, AWS, GCP, if you look between all of those different offerings, there's definitely a differentiation. And, I'm not going to say who's better or not, but at the end of the day, the services are getting commoditized. So I think what you are seeing trends from all the big players is that they want to move up the stack. How can they offer specialized, more unique services higher up the stack to their clients? Because that will differentiate them. You can have higher margin from those services. So if you are a founder and you're thinking that is the trend, this is where you're going to see the big players going, how is your offering helping them to get there? How is it helping them capture it? How does it help them differentiate themselves from the competition? And I think that for us, DAML is a unique language. There's no language such as DAML that allows you to digitize and modernize your workflows or interactions between your organization and other that is technology agnostic. And because of that, companies like VMware, which we have won already together, even before the announcement of the investment, have won multiple deals together, have seen that ability for them to differentiate themselves by working together with us.
And I'm curious, what put you on this path? Because I've got a feeling there's got to be a bit of a story behind the company. Can you remember where it all began?
Yeah, so I think so when I used to work for a company called DRW Trading out of Chicago, and I've been working in their, we started a venture arm that is called DRW VC, and we started investing in companies. And at the same time, the owner of DRW, his name is Don Wilson, is someone who, as long as you explain to him how you manage risk, does not mind additional risk. And in the very early days of crypto, one of the partners came to Don and said, I want DRW to trade crypto. And DRW went into trading crypto very early on. But in order to trade crypto, we started looking into solutions. So I was looking into companies in the crypto and blockchain space. And in 2014, what became very clear is that this idea of one source of truth that can be shared across different players that don't trust necessarily each other is quite significant. And I think that, this idea of the operations between a lot of financial institutions and a lot of companies being very expensive was very well known. But suddenly Bitcoin came and proved that you could actually share the source of truth across companies that don't trust each other. And that was just was a spark for myself, creating this thought that it's beyond just sharing data. It's how do you share workflows? So, and once you go on that journey of understanding what does it mean to share processes and data across each other, you start realizing that the amount of inefficiency that exists in the world of tech today that affect operations is quite ginormous. And we started looking into companies that we could invest in. And in 2014, we said the opportunity is too big to wait for the right company to come. And that's how I left DRW and started Digital Assets. It was very simple, starting to think about a new technology emerging, understanding the implication of this technology, but also start to think about what is the next wave once people understand what is the technology capable of, and then really just doing a market survey and saying that there was nothing out there.
Wow, an incredible journey you've been on. And of course, looking towards the future, I've got to ask, what's next for Digital Asset? Is there anything that you can share about the road ahead?
Yeah, so I think that I would break it into two components. So I mentioned that DAML is unique, that it allows you to model workflows and assets in a way that abstracts away the technology underneath. But I think one thing that is important to understand is that if you use DAML on blockchain X or on technology X, and then you use DAML on technology Y, the overall solution will have different properties because certain databases are centralized, certain blockchains are decentralized. So the overall property of the solution is different. So one of the things that I'm very excited that we're hoping to announce within the next 3 to 6 months is additional technologies that DAML will be able to run on that, in my opinion, are going to offer a very unique characteristics of solution that I think will open the door for a whole new wave of use cases that today are not possible. And a lot of properties that comes with privacy that today would be, I wouldn't say impossible. There's nothing that is impossible, in my opinion, in technology. It's a lot of times technologically not feasible. And technologically not feasible doesn't mean that it's impossible. It's just going to be too expensive and too hard to develop that economically it's not worth it. So I think that if you take DAML, which is very easy to use, in combination with technologies that are generally speaking very hard to use, that combination is extremely powerful. So that's one thing that I'm super excited about, that I'm hoping to make public within the next 3 to 6 months. That's one area. And then the second one is really just more and more customers that will become live and in production, because we all know that once you start seeing the trend, it's like when Uber came to the market. Everybody suddenly in pitch decks 3-6 months later was, we're going to be the Uber of dry cleaning. We're going to be the Uber of whatever, right? So once you see a usage of technology in a way that you've never thought about before, suddenly that creates a trend. So one of the things that I'm extremely excited about is, especially given what's going on with COVID, is this idea of digitizing manual processes. It's just amazing to see how with so much advanced technology, a lot of enterprises are still very, very vulnerable to manual processing. And I think we're going to see a bunch of our clients that have used the technology, and they will actually demonstrate the efficiency and reduction of risk that it gave to their business. That, in my opinion, will create a trend of how to digitize and automate a lot of your business.
Well, for anyone listening that would like to find out more information about how they could be leveraging DAML, or even just thinking about using technology in ways that they've not thought possible until now, what's the best way of finding you guys online and equally contacting your team if they've got any questions?
Yeah, absolutely. To be honest, the easiest way is just to go to the website of the language. So the website of the language is daml.com, DAML.com. There you can find access to our public Slack channel where you can directly ask our team questions. There's also ways there to engage with our team. And then you can also go to the company website, which is digitalasset.com. And also there you'll find different use cases that we've used the technology for. And there's also going to be an opportunity to get in touch with our team there.
Excellent. There's so much value in what we've talked about for me today, because I think in our bid to simplify everything, digital has in many ways overcomplicated everything. And like you said a few moments ago, businesses just don't bet on technology. So a technology agnostic solution and thinking about how we can have different ways of leveraging it to solve real problems, I think that is so valuable in a conversation that we don't have enough. So a big thank you for taking the time to share that with me today.
Same to you, Neil. Thank you so much for taking the time and for having so many great questions.
I love how Digital Asset has this interesting developer-friendly open source application called DAML. And with DAML, developers can easily build and deploy multi-party applications on any distributed ledger platform or database. And here's the important bit, blockchain experience is not required. And I cannot thank Yuval enough for coming on to discuss how blockchain is evolving from a technology focused primarily on the financial services industry to one that is being adopted across more and more vertical markets such as healthcare and retail and so many others. But I want to hear from you. Yes, you. I want to hear how you're using technology in ways that you previously didn't think possible and how you're simplifying your approach rather than adding unnecessary complexities. And my door is open to each and every one of you. techblogwriter@outlook.com is my email. My website is techblogwriter.co.uk. You've got links to my social channels, 1,300 tech interviews, and so much more. How does that sound? And as always, I welcome every one of you to email in, even if you've not got anything you want to say particularly, or just that you listen to the podcast every day or a couple of times a week. I would love to get to know you all a little bit better and put a name and a face to the people that listen to this podcast because, hey, we spend a lot of time together, don't we? So it would be nice to get to know you all a little bit better. But I'm afraid we're out of time again. I'll return again tomorrow. Hopefully you will all come and join me again. But a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.